utopian situations where somewhere in the deep future, ultimately, some genetically newborn children had to be raised to do X, Y, Z, Z, Y, X. Those two speak to that. And also, there's a documentary, you can find it on YouTube. It's called Seven Up. It's called Seven Up. And it started in 1969, I believe it was 1969. They took a group, a diverse group of this is whatever, the London British type folks, not America, the youngsters who were 7 years old, and then they followed them. I haven't gone to the end of it, but the goal was to find out what who and what they would be in the year 2000. So 7 years, 7 years, 7 years, 7 years up to the year 2000. So they followed them and they re-interviewed them. They started at 7, then they did it again at 14, then they interviewed them again at 21, then 28. So the goal was to understand how their lives would go over up to the year 2000. And it's based on Plato or Aristotle, I think it's Aristotle's statement where he says, give me the child at 7 and I'll give you the man. Give me the child at 7 and I'll give you the man. So the idea of molding and shaping the mindset of a child in a very particular direction is something for millennia, that is multiple millennia, 2,500 years, it's been a thing. Understanding that I believe there's a biblical statement where it says, bend the child in the way that he should go, and he will not depart therefrom, something like that. Okay, so the whole idea of the malleableness of that clay, right? And the whole the issue of nature versus nurture. This is not a new question. This is an old question. And what we're experiencing inside of all this is an answer to that very question. But let me go on, because a noble lie is central to it. But then it definitely brings into question / and consideration, which is reality of human beings. Well, what is a lie and what is the truth, right? It's a big deal, especially nowadays, right? But it's not, again, even so, it's still not a new question. But let's go on. Said they will accept their assignment, these children, without objection, and however, basically, because they will be told a noble lie from a young age, right? If I just want to just give an example, this is not explicitly from the philosophical perspective or the religious perspective, but just from a sociological perspective. I mean, the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy. I mean, these are matters that are established in Western society. And when children hear about this and about, and I don't know how many of us remember that moment when we realized that I don't, from myself, I couldn't say sitting here, I remember when I realized there is no Santa Claus. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe we all knew at some point, so I know ain't no Santa Claus. I know mama and daddy got to buy me that bicycle that I want, right? But there are those that, if you don't know no better, then you take that quote unquote lie as the truth, right? And even the Santa Claus song, you better watch out, you better not pout, you better not cry, I'm telling you why Santa Claus is coming to town. He knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you are awake. He knows when you've been good or bad. So be good for goodness sake, right? So it's that Santa Claus is kind of a noble lie in order to get better behavior out of the children, right? So it's like, okay, there's Santa Claus, and if you don't act right, then Santa Claus ain't gonna bring you X, Y, Z. So, okay, I better be good, right? For goodness sake, right? So no, I'm be good so I can get those presents, right? So what's motivating me? I'm being motivated by a noble lie, right? So it's sort of like, well, find the right lie for the child that will manipulate the child in the direction of behavior that you want from them. Continuing, it is a myth that teaches this noble lie. It is a myth that teaches that people originally all sprang from the earth. So now this is the noble lie, the formation of the noble lie. It's like, okay, this is where we came from, right? The goal of getting them to buy into that story is to mold and shape their behavior, i.e., consciousness, in a particular way so that it will be beneficial when it reaches maturity, right? It is a myth that teaches that people originally all sprang from the earth and the gods mixed gold into the constitutions of some individuals, silver into others, and finally lead or brass into the last group. If every person is not placed within his caste, the myth warns, ruin will befall its state, that is, in that society. Lying for noble purposes has long crossed civilizational lines. The Mahayana Buddhist text, known as the Lotus Sutra, dating from as early as the 3rd century CE, affords an example of a Buddhist teaching device of skillful means or shaping the Buddhist teachings to what is appropriate for each, what is appropriate for each audience, and sometimes even deviating from the strictures of Buddhist, the strictures of Buddhist, let's see what it is. The Lotus Sutra tells him, a rich man whose house is aflame, but whose children are too distracted by play to answer his cries to evacuate. He eventually lures them out by promising them beautiful gifts. They rush out and, unbeknown to them, are safe from the fire, but they find their father has lied about the gifts. Then, in the place of his false promises, he gives each of them a more stunning gift, an orange chariot drawn by a white bull. In the allegory of the Lotus Sutra, the burning house was the prison of desire, and the false gifts are the Buddhist teachings that bring the children out into the world of enlightenment. Associating Buddha's teachings with lies was morally fraught, though, and there was debate among early Buddhist masters about whether the father had told a falsehood. It was concluded that he had done no wrong. His was a noble lie. Story comes to mind of Imam Qasim rahimahullah, speaking about that first Hajj, that the mass Hajj that Imam Mohammed led from our community to Mecca. And Qasim speaks of this woman, older sister, who had been raised on the teachings of the Nation of Islam. And so when they got to Mecca, Tyson, he portrays what the women say, Wallace, she's in Mecca, right? Wallace, this is not what your father promised us. It's like we were told that Mecca had streets paved with gold. And I went in 2001, and it's like if you found a toilet that was working, and that was new. The whole idea of seated toilets in 2001 was a new thing at that time, right? So during those years, those round figures, a little more than, or pardon me, a little less than 20 years before that time, which is when the group went, and then Elijah Muhammad went in 1959. It's like it didn't look nothing like what was promised in the Lessons of the Nation of Islam. But the idea of Farad was to call us away from what we were in, which was far worse than that. It's like being in a house on fire, and what he had offered us and what he brought us and what he gave us was better than that. But how did he do it? He did it with a noble lie. And a noble lie is a strategy. It's known before. And again, now I'm saying this so you can have this as one of the artifacts for your understanding. But that's not the only thing. But to understand the nature of it as a strategy. He knew he was telling a lie, right? He knew he was telling a lie because he knew what al-Islam was. But he also is aware of strategically how sometimes you have to, quote unquote, deceive people. This is air quotes, deceive people in order to get them to a place that, in your view, could not get them to that place otherwise. All right. So that's a big part of incorporating, understanding what this whole thing is grounded in part upon. Right. Now we go further into man/myth-made minds. Right. It's very important to understand how myths make minds. Myths make minds. This is something that Imam, their publication, you can find it all over. The idea, myths we live by. There's a publication, myths we live by. Myths are part of the social infrastructure of cultures, right? So let's go on. So we say man, you could say man-made minds, but men make minds with myths. Men make minds with myths. Myths are the material that minds are made from, right? We're going to go further into understanding when we talk about myth, but let me invite you, dismiss from your mind the idea that myths are lies. Even though we talk about noble lie, a noble lie is, let's call it a myth. A noble lie is a myth, right? Here's a definition that you can work with as we proceed. To understand myth and the nature of myth. Myths are a part of human life. It's part of the mechanism, just like we talk about language. These are some of the tools of mind and consciousness that's in the nature of our human existence, right? Just like storytelling, poetry, all of those things. Myths are found again in all of those forms as well, right? Songs, poetry, story, projecting, holding and projecting the valuable principles that myths are intended to encompass for the good, the quote unquote, the good myth, the effective myth, the powerful myth is the one that holds more principles and values and ideals that are critical to the stability and the longevity of the people who or quote unquote born in and under that particular social structure, a social structure that is well instantiated by those particular myths. So all right, so in the absence of divine revelation, that is, when you're not being directed to be and act this way or that way by scripture, you've lost touch with scripture, or you don't have revelation as a foundation. In the absence of divine revelation, society is moved forward by human genius. Some of the most prominent paradigms of religion today are products of man-made minds. All right. You see, that's Mos Maryam there on the left. That's the Nation of Islam that was first purchased under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So you have, that's an example of man-made minds. You have the Mormon temple, example, man-made minds. And you also understand there's a myth behind what that structure stands for. In Chicago, there's a myth that structure stands for wherever you find Mormons. The capital, I think, of Mormon life is Utah. And then the menorah, there's also, and we covered this in another segment. I think I have the link somewhere. But in any case, I think it's either 6 or 7, no matter. That the birth of Judaism that we have, Judaism, just you need to just separate those two words, Judaism, right? So it's all about Judah, right? Judaism. You can talk about the tribe of Judah. You can talk about the return to Judah. All of that, it was about that, right? Judaism. And we spent a lot of time talking about Ezra and Nehemiah. We're going to revisit that just a little bit when we go on. So the point, man-made minds, Ezra and Nehemiah, they are the source of what we consider to be modern day Judaism, right? And of course, we know about Trinitarianism and the idea of the crucified Savior. I think there's I know that there's a book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors or something like that. So it's like, that's not a new story by any stretch, but it's the same story recrafted for whatever the contemporary purposes were when they were brought up, Krishna and others like that, Osiris. No, it wasn't Osiris, it was Horus, Apollo, and all those characters in the myth, and they serve their purpose. They serve the role of, in some measure, getting the children out of the burning house, according to the Buddha Lotus Sutra. So I'm saying it's not a new thing. We're living inside of it. These things have not been questioned at large in different places, but in terms of the overall, there are societies that still rest upon these ideas and who are willing and have given their lives, both physically and socially and economically, for the maintenance and for living out the myths that are underlying it, but not taking those things that they're convicted about or convinced about or committed to, not taking them as myths, taking them as the truth. Okay, but that's the nature of human life, how we react to things that we believe to be true. In the segment, we talked about the invention of the Jewish people, just to give the example, because I'm saying that the tribe of Shabazz and whatever we were in the Nation of Islam, it was a repeat of the same process that brought about a quote unquote new people by identity, by identification. And I'm saying when we get more toward the end of this whole story, I literally want us to understand there's a word coming, doesn't come up today, except by my mentioning it right now, but it's called speciation. Speciation. How new species get created. And so when we talk about the tribe of Shabazz, we talk about Bilalian in that sense. All of this is toward the end more so. When we understand that, you will understand it's a new people on the earth. And even as I say that, when I say a new people, I also included in that understanding, a new people and a true people. A new people and a true, not a new and a false people, a new and true people. I'm saying what the line that we are distinguishing is that, yes, there were elements, the noble lie was involved in it. The trajectory, however, wasn't for false ends. The trajectory was for the restoration and the reconnection, talking about diachronic discontinuity, speaking of the history that we talk about each time. It's the reconnection. The Imam talks about sacred lifeline. It's about how does the life and who you are connect with the original lifeline from kun fayakun, I'll put it that way, from inni ja'ilu fil ardi khalifa. How does what it is that you are seeing and representing, does it reconnect with that? And we're saying that it reconnects with that. It's not a continuation of the noble lie as such. The noble lie has served its catalytic purpose. It has served its purpose as a womb of sorts, and a womb, in fact. Now, the life that comes from that is not grounded in. See, a catalyst is something that starts the process, but it's not, it doesn't remain in the process. Look it up. So yes, we had the catalyst, and so now you have the new life. And now that new life has to, and this is where we are now when we talk about Renaissance. When I say this moment of conversation, but the longer story, the Renaissance comes later. But I want you to understand that the Renaissance, the rebirth that we're talking about, it's a rebirth in conjunction with a reconnection with the original Inni ja'ilu fil ardi khalifa line and declaration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's quote hand is in this. And so they plan, and Allah has already planned, and Allah is the best planners. But let's come back to this moment for this morning. So we went through this in that section. So Dr. Shlomo Sand, professor of Jewish history at Tel Aviv University. So this guy is not quirk, whatever. So it's like to be the professor emeritus of Tel Aviv University after, for a decade and more, being the professor at Tel Aviv University and in Jewish history. For him to say what he said and publish what he published, okay, come on. So I don't know how much more authoritative you have to be when someone writes a book to speak of the invention of the Jewish people, all right? So I'm continuing part. We detailed it in another segment, but I want to go ahead and cover it now as well. It says, there was no Jewish people, only a Jewish religion. The exile of the Jewish people by the Romans never happened, so there was no return. Most stories of national identity formation in the Bible are myths. This is a very big thing for us to understand, because the issue, even I'll repeat it again, it's a good thing to hold on to. A diachronic discontinuity. When we talk about diachronic discontinuity, that is a lack of continuity in time for who you are. right? So it's like if you can say in your life, you know, the lost years, the lost years, somewhere between 15 and 19, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Right? It's just a big blank, right? Well, that's diachronic discontinuity. And in larger presentation, we talked about that what that accounts for what they call dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative identity disorder is split personality. That's the short version of split personality. And so that's why among the so-called American Negro, you can get so much of this craziness, right? This craziness, right? And you can get people, you have Muslim acting one way, the Bilali Muslim. It's like he's acting, he's got the name, he's got the dress, but then it's like, wait a minute, you're Muslim. What are you doing? Why are you saying? How is that possible? You have this public presentation. You have this way that you are among the Muslim, but then when you finish talking to your children, you talk to your wife, you talk to your employer, etc. It's like you are crazy, right? That's a part of that dissociative identity disorder, that diachronic discontinuity. And if the person is not aware of and they haven't healed that trauma that's still pushing its way through into their everyday life, family and work and what have you, it's like that's why people you have people who create situations where people say, man, don't mess with them Muslims, man, they crazy, man. Why? Because they looking at, you know, what I don't know, Billy Epcot. I'm trying to avoid any names that Abdullah Kareem Rahman Aziz Kabir, right? He got that name, but then you know he really Billy Epcot, right? It says, like, man, that's Billy Epcot, right? So that idea of being true to that label, right? Meaning, except in Islam, let's move on. So the idea of identity, the restoration of identity, the reconnection, the formulation, the instantiation of an original identity, an identity that embraces, yes, all this happened in our history. That's fine. So that's a part of our master narrative. That's fine. The idea is now I understand it and I interpret it in a way and I incorporate it in my sense of myself in a way that is what we're talking about. Mashallah, if you embrace it to what we're talking about, then you got God in the whole program. It's like God been in it from the gate. But Tyson talks about from the first moment that we have been engaged in this righteous rebellion. Yeah, that's it. And that's the idea, to reconnect with that particular spirit. And so, okay, so it's about everything that we're talking about is about identity. It is about identity. It was about identity for the Jewish people, and it was and is about identity for every people who wants to have this sense of uh, uh, affirmation, this sense of being, this sense of existing, this sense of connectedness with the universe at large in a true way, right? Okay, so that's what the people were doing, what they were doing for the Jewish people and for others. That in Allahu Alam was the story, but let's move on. So most of the stories of national identity formation in the Bible are myths, including the Exodus from Egypt and the conquest under Joshua. The conception of a unified Jewish ethnicity and history are inventions of Zionism. This is what he's saying. And when you think about what's going on over there right now, it's like, are those God-connected people? Are those people that are connected with the original human lifeline and acting out the values, principles, and ideas that flow from that nature created by Allah in the human being? or not. And that should tell you something. You talk about Frankenstein's monster. All right. All these we covered in another segment. The Zionists, this is Shlomo, Dr. Shlomo Sand speaking. He says, the Zionists need to devise for them a shared ethnicity and historical continuity, produced a long series of inventions and fictions, along with an invocation of racist theses. Some were concocted in the minds of those who conceived the Zionist movement, while others were offered as the findings of genetic studies conducted in Israel. He's just saying, just like Farad Muhammad created this mashup of different concepts, ideas, etc. And some of them were presented as their science, and some of them were presented as whatever different religious foundation. Same thing was done to give us what we have in the Jews and Israel overall. Speaking of myth, Dr. John Vervaeke, in his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, he said, when we use the word myth, society at large tends to mean a falsehood that is widely believed. That's because they've lost the best meaning of the term. Myths aren't false stories about the ancient past. They're symbolic stories about perennial patterns that are always with us. Okay. That's the nature of myth from an academic, scientific, historical perspective. Myths, I'll say again, like language, it's just part and parcel of being human. It's part, we talked about language and how it's the early rhyme schemes of early languages. It was so as to facilitate communication. I mean, just the way we teach children alphabets, for example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. What they're learning as a song, but they're also learning the actual alphabet, right? So it's the same way with stories and myths. Stories and myths, the parts that are critical to life in a given society are incorporated in the myths of that society, and then they're absorbed by the members of the society from an early age. And so this is why, again, when you get older, then somebody has to teach you the meanings of the myths, right? And when they teach you the meanings of the myths, they are teaching you, if they're doing it right, they're teaching you the values that the myths hold, which you need in order to get the best experience for and from your life as you are constructed / socially speaking. That's what it is. So you get taught the stuff as a child, nursery rhymes, right? Nursery rhymes, Mother Goose Tales, what have you. All right, but then you got Aesop's Fables, right? Then when you get older, okay, you stop taking those myths and stories and fairy tales as history and as fact, but then somebody opens them up for you and say, okay, this is what it really means. And so therefore, slow and steady wins the race. Gentle persuasion is stronger than force, blah, blah, blah. So you can see the problem. If someone continues to live in the myth as history, that's a problem, right? And that's the problem that's faced in the world. And that's the problem for those who are in the Nation of Islam, still believing deportation of the muum, mothership, all the rest of that. Without understanding, okay, it's not that specifically, concretely, it means this, right? So another definition for understanding myth in the best meaning is truth that is not necessarily historical. Truth that is not necessarily historical. So there is a truth in the deportation of the moon, but it's not history. There is a truth that the tribe of Shabazz, living in the best part of what have you, but it's not history. Yaqub, there's a truth. There's a truth in Yaqub's history, but it's not necessarily historical. This is the great blessing that Imam Mohammed, rahimahullah, first of Farad, he put it together. Alhamdulillah. I mean, you got to respect that, because you need somebody in the scheme of history. You need somebody to package a myth for you. We're going to say more about that in a minute. Okay, so where's your myth? Joe got his myth. Willie got his, Susie got her myth. Where's yours? Right? Maybe better put in ethnicity or nationality, right? The Europeans have their myth. The Asians have their myth. Even the Africans have their myth. The Pacific Islanders have their myths, right? Where's yours? Bilalian. Where's yours? So-called American Negro, ex-chattel slave. Where's yours? Right? Because everybody who gets instantiated and gets established, they have one. Where's yours? Right? And so from that perspective, catalytically speaking, getting us started, putting us on what appears to be the right road, but at least in appearance and in concretely so many ways better than whatever it was that we were on. In fact, in the one that we were on, I refer you to Caste, the origins of our discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. And if you have the book, if you have the public, if you don't, you should have it. Look at and talk about the mud seal doctrine. You can look up the mud seal doctrine separate and apart from that, but seeing it in the whole, the way she puts it down is very, very valuable. And that is the mud seal doctrine. So it's like that's a myth that was established by this society that said, this is your place in history. This is your identity. This is your reason for being, to be the mud seal of this society. So if you don't have another myth that undermines and overcomes and disempowers that old myth and empowers you with your own new myth, strong enough to sustain an identity upon, then you don't have it yet. Well, that's what Farad gave to us. He gave us a myth that was strong enough for us to stand on at the time, so okay. So just understand that myths, don't let anyone tell you, man, there's a myth, and like treat it like it's nothing to be respected. No, like it or not, know it or not, understand it or not, aware of it or not, you are in some way or the other existing upon what was generated by a myth, right? The manifest destiny of the West or what have you, myth, right? All the rest of it. So I'm thinking about some of these anthems and songs that quote unquote make America what it is, and have played to generate certain sentiments and emotions out of us and in us, because for those people it served that purpose. Let me see if I can hit something real quick. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, this is Dr. Jordan Peters. This is an abbreviated form of so we can move on. It said, we're protected by what we cannot see that comes from something we do not understand. We're protected by something we cannot see, which comes from something we do not understand. The extended portion of it explains that the thing that we're protected by that we cannot see is our culture. The thing that we're protected by that we cannot see is our culture, right? And then it says that comes from something we do not understand. Most people do not understand the course, the source of the culture that protects them. All right, because even there's a what Tyson gives us, for example, it's like there we are still in some way in our genetic, especially those of us who have this kind of awareness and energy and perspective and perception and sensibility and sensitivity that says, oh hell no, we ain't doing that. We doing this, right? Even if we don't have the foundation for it, or understanding why. Take a El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm Little, Malcolm X. It's like he didn't know this history and this background, etc. But there was something in him said, I know it's not that. And so, of course, he was criminal, relatively speaking. When I say relatively speaking, he was a genuine criminal. But I'm saying relative to the society as it was established, like, well, yeah, I'm against that. So yeah, I'm an outlaw. I'm outside of the law that's established, designed to hold me in a particular place. I ain't gonna be in that place. Now, I don't have the wisdom of why I am this way. I don't have the awareness of why I am, but it's coming from me in a way where it's like, look, this is what it's gonna be, right? That is so that spirit is the spirit in Fannie Lou Hamer and the others, where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., so many others, they gave a Christian base for it, a Bible base for it, a Jesus base for it, and he said, okay, well, that'll work. So he got on that, and so then you start getting things like SNCC and the like. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, I get that, but that's not doing it all that needs to be done. What am I trying to get to? I'm trying to get to the idea that there's that spirit, that quote unquote, that rebellion, quote unquote, which is actually the human nature saying, no, this ain't right. I don't know what really is the deal, but I know this ain't right. Right. So yeah, the Imam talked about Julia, the slave Julia, say you look like God in the face, but you act like savages or whatever, act like the devil in your heart or something like that. So the idea is there is that something, right? So what I'm saying is it's that spirit that is actually over Bilalian people, let's call them melanated people. So it's like there is that we don't know where that spirit comes from, but it does constitute a culture from those whose spirit brings them under that umbrella. It says so we're protected by that. Even those that don't come under the umbrella of Al-Islam, they are very happy to know that Muslims, especially Bilalian Muslims, are they're glad to know that we're there. It's like, okay, I ain't one of y'all, but I'm sure glad y'all there, right? So it provides, our presence provides a protection for people who ain't even under the umbrella in a formal way. And any loss from our perspective in their eyes and in their space, it's like it's a loss for them as well, right? So when it said that we're protected by something we cannot see, that's that spirit that is an overarching, an umbrella, I'll say again, that is protecting us, even though we don't know that it's there, but we are protected. So we're protected. We cannot see. I'm talking about non-Muslims as well. And I'm also speaking that applies. We got to move on. That applies also to those who they don't subscribe to Imam W.D. Muhammad, for example. And yeah. But they're glad we're here, even though they're somewhere else, And they're with that, they're different, like minor attacks that I've heard of recently coming from that. But that's still, you can't stop thinking about us. It's like, so you taking all your scholarship and all your energy and all your time to try to figure out, don't listen to them, don't believe what they're saying. Bidah, bidah, bidah. Okay, what's up? It's like, don't you have something else to do? So, in any case, so the idea is that we're protected by something we cannot see that comes from something we do not understand. So all this effort is to bring that understanding so that, okay, let's understand where this is coming from, and understand now how to construct, by the grace of Allah, how to construct a really instantiated society. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. This is inside of what we're speaking of. Everything else is like this foundational framework, etc. It's like, but if you understand the source of culture, society, community, in the formal, historical, instantiated, anthropological sense, that's what we're talking about. When you understand, they say, here's an opportunity, and this is actually what's being done to generate and instantiate an original human community grounded in a God-given, God-driven master narrative. Because it's God's business we're talking about here. But again, this is why I embrace the doctor's statement when he said that comes from something that we do not understand. What is the something that we do not understand? All of our history and how that history connects to the will of God. All of our history and how that history connects to the will of God. That's what we don't understand. But the presence of God from the beginning, right, in this righteous rebellion, in this movement, in this effort to restore what began again with the first chattel slave capture, that from that time, God's will began also. Our rebellion by nature, it started, but then also God's will also was right there and present, and has been there and present with us, and has had its different permutations at different times, different manifestations, different quote unquote, be careful, personifications throughout the ages, right? That is God's will working through different personalities and different individuals, okay? Keep them in the right perspective. Don't make them divine. That's the biggest problem. You make them divine. If you make them divine, that's where your mistake is. The will of God can be represented and is represented in persons on different occasions in history, but they're not God. That's the mistake. Just don't make them God. Right? The will of God, okay. But God, no, can't do it. All right, so let's see. All right, let's see. Okay. So restate this so we can reconnect. So when we use the word myth, society at large tends to mean a falsehood that is widely believed. That's because they've lost the best meaning of the term. Myths are false stories. Myths aren't false stories about the ancient past. They are symbolic stories about perennial patterns that are always with us. So even the story, even Yaqub's history, what is it? Yaqub's myth, for example. It is, let me walk through this line. It is a symbolic story about perennial patterns that are always with Bilalians. All right. So Yaqub's story about this dissatisfaction, satisfied, dissatisfied, all that, black germ, brown germ, tribe of Shabazz, trying to blow up the planet because everybody wants to speak the same language. Uh, the idea about your hair used to be this way, but when the tribe of Shabazz went down into Africa, the sweat made it curl up. The lack of oxygen in the humidity of the environment made the nostrils swell. The proximity to the equator made your skin darker. All of those things were designed to explain issues that existed among and continue to exist among us, but it was incorporated in the myth. And the idea was to resolve these questions that, oh, well, that's that way because that's the way it was here. But it wasn't always like that, right? All that was a prescription designed to medicate the mindset that was troubling us, right? So it's a proper myth for, I'm going to use the term melanated people. It's a proper myth for melanated people because it is explaining and putting into a story package perennial patterns that are always with the melanated people. We always have these kind of problems, right? And I dare say, I find it to be true. Django, the movie Django, I see Quentin Tarantino saying, "Look, let me tell you, you Negroes, quote unquote." He's more positive than my statement there. These are your issues. I'm telling you, if you had the time to consider the need, willingness, whatever, to walk through the tropes and the messages and the circumstances in that movie, you can say, yep, this is a perennial problem. Yep, this is a perennial problem. Yep, this is a perennial problem. It's like just one that comes to mind when he had those clothes. I think most of y'all probably seen it when he came in, riding on the horse, what have you. Oh, the girl was showing him around. Candyland, the plantation, and he had the little boy blue kind of clothes on, and it said, so it said it's something on the order, where you get those clothes? Yeah, I picked those clothes. Say, you picked those clothes yourself? So even the slave, it's like, man, your taste in clothes is this off, right? The one when the slave drivers, the slave takers were taking them to the worst slave joint than the one they were leaving, and then Quentin Django blew the cats up, right? Blew them up. Now the slave cage that they were in, that they were being carried in, door was wide open. Door was wide open. Them slaves would not move. The folks that were taking you is dead. Door is wide open, and you ain't trying to get the hell up out of there, right? What's going on, right? So it makes you think about Harriet Tubman, and they talked about how many slaves she freed, and she said, "I would have freed more if they had recognized that they were slaves," something on that order. That it's like it's not what somebody is doing to us; it's what we're doing to ourselves internally, personally, and the like. And that's nothing but al-Islam. It said God will never change the grace he bestowed upon the people until they change it themselves what is in their own souls. This is a perennial pattern that is a problem for us. And Farad's myths were designed to address and speak to those perennial patterns. But if you take them as history, then you're going to be locked in to that and never come out into and make a connection with the original life that world took from you. And you'll never be, quote unquote, humanly free in the fullest sense. Well, I want you to understand, persons like myself and others who embrace that idea, it's like, this is what freedom is. This is what freedom is. There's some that climb out of one cage, and no offense intended, but they climb into an Arab cage. They climb into a Pakistani cage. They climb into some other ethnic group's cage thinking that, yeah, now I'm a real Muslim. No, man, you're still not connected to your original life. You have a line of life that your life is connected to, but it was disconnected. You were disconnected from it. And with the strategy of W.D. Farad and the like, and you didn't have to be there. Okay, I'm saying a little more than 10 right now. But it's like you didn't have to be in the Nation of Islam in order to get this transformation, because those that made the transformation, they have the, if they do, they have the connection. So to connect with those who are connected, like all of us at Al Islam, right? I never met any of the companions. I never met any of the Talib and the Tabi. It is, I never met any, but I'm in touch with, inshallah. I'm in touch with the line that came through them and came to them, and now it's extended here. And the benefit of life from Al Islam, from the Quran, life of the Prophet Muhammad, etc., is no less potent for me in the 21st century than it was for them in the 7th and 8th century. Same stuff. Okay, well, same way with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Nation of Islam, etc. The catalyst and the role that it was served, that role has been served, right? Now there's a life that came from it that is connected, and to connect with that life, I hear Jesus statements in the Bible, and what I'm saying, that you connected with that life, and then you connect with that life, and so now you get your original life back. And that's the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You didn't have to be there. You didn't have to sell fish and sell papers. You didn't have to be in the ranks in order for you to really get that. No, the ones who got it, they got it, click, they're on. And so now, just like electrical connections from one body to another, you connect with something that's connected, then you're going to get the same juice flowing through you as those who are connected. That's nature, that's life. Okay. So, yeah, let's go ahead and finish. We're gonna pick up from here next week, inshallah. Given this real and unique set of psychic and socioeconomic circumstances, which tended and still tends to confine African Americans to a state of general inferiority, and whites in the Black psyche in a state of general superiority, that is, in the psyche of the ones who haven't been freed from it, they still keep the whites in a state of general superiority. Excuse me. A special intervention was and is needed to restore the ex-slaves' humanity. Understand that. That's the goal. The goal is to rehumanize the ones who have been dehumanized, right? And when we say rehumanize, we're not talking about civil rights, quote unquote, exclude. That's just one of the things that kind of goes along with it and whatever. But no, we're talking about Adam. We're talking about Allama Adam al Asma'a kullaha. We're talking about reconnecting with the line that Allah put into the nature of the first human creation, and that we got disconnected from. And it's an inheritance, literally speaking. We were robbed of an inheritance that connects back to the very beginning of human history, right? And this is about being reconnected to that original lifeline, so that the power in that line is now, I'm lit with that again, right? That's what we're talking about. It was needed to restore the ex-slaves' humanity. Plain institutional religious spirituality won't do. And now you should understand why wouldn't, quote unquote, plain institutional religious spirituality won't do. Because the plain institutional religious spirituality, and I'm talking about from Judaism, Christianity, Islam, as it is in the world in general, now, they are not potentiated and expressed in their connection to this originality of humanity that I'm speaking of. some people misunderstood and took some offense to Imam. Said Muslim American, his entitlement, his title, Muslim American spokesman for human salvation. What are you doing? What are you talking about? Muslim American spokesman for human salvation. It's like, look, I am speaking for, as a Muslim American, I am speaking for the salvation of the humanity that Allah has created us for, but has been lost and is muted and is unexpressed in the society now. Well, I will speak up for it. So he's a Muslim American spokesman for humans. The human nature needs to be saved in this society. The human nature needs to be saved in this society. Don't you see that? So most all of the other institutionalized religious spirituality are in some way compromised by the superculture that is contrary to natural humanity. You look at the four birds, look at education. Is it situated to benefit natural humanity? Look at governance. Is it situated to benefit natural humanity? Look at economics. Is it situated to benefit that? Look at the culture at large. Is it situated to benefit natural humanity? No. So it is in those religious expressions, those institutionalized religious expressions, most all of them, and due to the lack of knowing even among Muslim leadership, you have not embraced at large, you have not embraced the true understanding of Adam in his originality. And that failure to connect with that leads to an impotence of impact on the society at large, and certainly for what happened to the sleeping, mentally dead so-called American Negro. That's not enough. Now, I know there are those who embrace it, thinking that, finally I'm at home, I got it. All we got to do is just look and say, you ain't there yet. You're not there. You're missing some serious pieces. In fact, some of them old pieces is what you got you moving the way that you're moving, because you just simply translated the old piece into the new piece and you thought you had something new. No, it's the same soup in a different bowl. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about, but we got to end this morning. So we need it, and we need a social myth or a new master narrative. That's a part of what we're talking about now. The new master narrative is looking back at that history, reinterpret that history in the light of the presence of the will of God and the natural order of things and Allah's sunnah and all of those things. That's what we're doing here, but we're particularizing it to this particular line because we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done that for us, and we want to recognize God's grace in that regard. So that's going to be it for this morning. Inshallah, let's see what comes up next. Yes, the need for an African American social myth. Inshallah, we're going to get to that next time. Inshallah, but for right now, we're going to stop that share. And Tyson, come on through. Any comments you want to make? And otherwise, when I say otherwise, and then we're going to go on. Come on through.
Alhamdulillah, same. I'm just super appreciative of this opportunity, learning so much. I'll be brief on this. Like one of my degrees when I was doing my undergrad was comparative religion. And so we spent a lot of time focusing on, one of the things that I focused on were religious movements that were established here in the United States. So looking at the Nation of Islam, it's a very unique experience because it was here. And, reading books and talking to folks in the nation, you get a lot of information, but this is so much deeper because of, just the breadth of knowledge that you have, the experience that you have, who you've learned directly from. You can't get that anywhere else except directly from the source. And so I truly, truly appreciate that. And I appreciate you making sure that we all have that. And you said that earlier. You're like, you want us to know what you know.
Yeah.
So thank you for creating a space for us to learn as much of that as possible so we know who we are and we know what we're supposed to be doing.
Alhamdulillah. We appreciate it. All right, y'all. So I'm checking out. So may Allah bless us and guide us nearer to the path. And inshallah, so we see you next week, inshallah. God's peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.